Trammell Crow, I'll have you introduce yourselves each individually, and as you begin the program. I don't know, Ellen, if you want to start and kick us off. This is an exciting project at Bellward. We've been talking about the Bellward campus for a very long time, and so we'll hear the presentation, and then we'll have time for Q&A. They're coming to us relatively early, so they may not have all the answers yet, but at least we can share our questions with them. So Ellen, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you virtually. I'm Ellen Corin with Chesapeake Public Strategies, and I'm working with the Trammell Crow team on the community outreach piece of the puzzle for their vision for the Bellward campus. Just to say, as Marilyn mentioned, we're in very early days right now. We have done a concept plan which paints broad brushstrokes, and the Trammell Crow team will talk about that more. So we're not long on detail, but we're big on intentions. And so we wanted to make sure that we had an introductory meeting. Phil and Marilyn were kind enough to meet with us for coffee a number of weeks ago, which we greatly appreciated. And they offered to have us come in to introduce ourselves to you, knowing that we don't have too much to share. But as we get further into the process, we would like to be able to come back and chat with all of you and provide more details and go from there. So we look at this as a beginning of a great relationship, and we're looking forward to working with all of you. So with that, we have with us this evening, and they're the ones that are really going to be making the presentations. I'm sorry, my mind just went blank. Eric Fisher with Trammell Crow. And Eric is the, my God, I'm just drawing a blank here. Eric, you can give them your title because my mind is just not working right now. And Chris Rulin, who is our Sherpa for land use issues and that land use attorney and partner at Lurch, Early and Brewer. So with that, I'll turn things over to Eric. And Eric, you can let Chris know when you want to start running the slides. We have a few slides for you just to give you a sense of where.
Sure. Well, first of all, first of all, can everyone hear me okay? Good, perfect. My name is Eric Fisher, and I'm a managing director and principal with Trammell Crow, and I run our healthcare and life sciences practice. And I'm based here in Washington, D.C., but I also work nationally throughout our company's footprint. Before I give a very brief overview of the project, I really would like to acknowledge our good partnership with Johns Hopkins to get here today. I know I see Mitch Bonanno on the call, and it's been really one where it's been a truly an excellent relationship to really take their extraordinary work and really bring it forward with what we plan to share tonight. So again, I'd just like to acknowledge the great partnership that we have with Hopkins, and it's just the beginning. So with it, if Chris Rulin could just briefly pull up the screen, that'd be terrific. Thank you, Chris. And I think, yep, I think we're good, Chris. Why don't you just advance to the next slide? We've already gone through introductions. I'm the only person from Trammell Crow on tonight's call, and I'm joined by Chris Rulin with Lurch Early and Chris Rulin. And the Lurch Early team, we've worked on multiple projects throughout the county, so we have a long history of again, a very good partnership of producing great projects. Next slide, Chris. There are some familiar faces on tonight's call, but just a bit about Trammell Crow, because I think that projects that we're talking about tonight require a developer that has, first of all, scale and exceptionally strong capital footings. And our company has been around for about 75 years. We'll be celebrating that 75th anniversary next year. We're consistently ranked as one of the largest or the largest developer in the United States. And we focus on all product types. These are just simply numbers, but currently we have roughly about $30 billion worth of projects in pipeline. And frankly, a good amount here in the greater Washington, Maryland, Virginia, DC market. Next slide, Chris. As always, our vision is to be preeminent in what we do, create exceptional results for our stakeholders, and we consider our community to be our number one stakeholder, our partners to be our stakeholders, and really uphold a rewarding environment, promote truly exceptional results, and really work with great people. Next slide, please. So a bit about what we do. We focus on all cylinders. We do a great deal of office. Industrial is really distribution and logistics, multifamily, mixed use, healthcare, and life sciences. And I've had the good fortune for nearly 19 years to be the leader of both healthcare and the life sciences practice within our group. And several of these projects that are in front of you are examples of ones that I've worked on. The lower left is the Baylor Heart Hospital, Fulton Labs in Chicago, a great project in Denver that was a mixed use life sciences healthcare project. And then in the upper right, a GMP facility. So it's one where we bring a full bench, full talent to every initiative we do. Next slide, Chris. I think what's unique about Bellwood Farm, it's really from the first day I had the opportunity to walk on the site, is that it really has some extraordinary slope and topology to it. And with it, what works very well in the Maryland life science market is what I call a mid-rise type product. Large floor plates, very high ceilings, and exceptional ability to do multiple types of functions. So they're very adaptable buildings. So our focus on Bellwood Farm has been what I typically refer to as about a mid-rise type project, anywhere between 3 to 6 to 7 stories. So here are some examples of both some healthcare and some life sciences projects that fall within that low to mid-rise example, many of which I've had my footprint on, and some that I was just recently in Southern California last week working on, the one in the upper right and the one in the lower right too. So next slide, Chris. As with being a public company owned by our parent company, CBRE, we're defined by our core values: respect, integrity, service, and excellence, our RISE values. And one that it's focused on our company, our community, diversity in our industry, truly to excel in all of these categories, to bring both vision and mission in a collaborative way to each project we work together. So I just wanted to share a bit about our company, given that this is a very large project. You'll be hearing a lot about it over the next several years. And we have other projects that we're working on also along the I-270 corridor too. So, we'll be participating on multiple calls in the future. So with that, Chris, if you want to advance to the next slide, that'd be terrific. I'm going to pass it over to Chris Rowland to just share with you essentially where we are and where we're heading.
Sure. Thank you, Eric. I hope everyone can hear me, and I apologize. I'm having to log in 2 different ways at the moment, but I will get through the next couple of slides, and then I'll be able to minimize my screen, and I'll be able to see everyone again. So if we could hold comments until the end, I think that would be helpful, primarily because I don't think I will see you. My screen is completely taken over with the slide right now. So as Ellen said, we are at the very early stages, very beginning stages of this process. and we only have a couple of images to go through tonight, but it should give you a sense of the direction that the project team is working in. Again, this project really represents a collaboration with the property owner, Johns Hopkins University, for the next phase of development of the Bellward property under the Great Seneca Science Corridor Master Plan. Before I show you the concept, it helps to, I think, look at this sort of general summary of the process. And you'll see on the left, we are here, the concept plan. The concept plan is, for those who may not be aware, just an informal submission with the Montgomery County Planning Department and county reviewing agencies to get preliminary feedback on development plans and ideas. The process has an application, but really it's to initiate a filing, to upload some preliminary materials, and to then get agency feedback that's delivered at a development review committee meeting. We, at least in this case, submitted the concept plan in March of this year, and we received some preliminary DRC feedback right before Easter. So that process is for all intents and purposes, complete. It's really just a way of doing some gut check on the direction that we're moving in. What will be happening, though, looking to the second and third columns, are actual submissions for the project. And because the Bellward property is subject to an approved preliminary plan of subdivision, those next steps are really going to be a site plan application that will be submitted to the Montgomery County Planning Department and reviewed by the Planning Board. In this case, there is a long-term development concept that we will show where we're going, but there's a nearer term. The nearer term project is where we are driving to, which will be a site plan proposing buildings and open spaces, et cetera. We have sort of an intermediate site plan that we're also planning that is going to precede the building site plan. And that intermediate site plan is really just going to be for roads, sidewalks, utilities, and infrastructure preparatory work for the site. So in terms of next steps, I think it helps just to lay this out, because the next batch of correspondence that's going to come out pertains to the middle column, the infrastructure site plan. And we will be having a formal pre-submission community meeting for that on May 10th. But that plan is really just going to show the infrastructure items. The items of real interest, the buildings and the open spaces, et cetera, will come later. We anticipate in July with the site plan that's going to have those elements.
Chris,
So just
Chris, before you move on, I just wanted to emphasize the infrastructure site plan is for internal infrastructure to the campus. When it talks about circulation and roads and stuff like that, it's everything that's internal to the campus, not external roads or transportation or traffic or anything like that. That's with the second site plan, correct? I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So again, and just to contextualize things, and I know that this committee is aware of the sort of guiding documents and approvals that primarily drive this, but we have, of course, the master plan, which establishes the county vision for the LSC Bellward district, in which this property is located. I'm sure this committee is familiar with those recommendations. We also have the prior approved preliminary plan of subdivision from 2011 that essentially set parameters for building out the property under the master plan and what that would look like. The concept plan, which I'm about to show you, was developed under both of those documents, utilizing kind of the prior approvals, but also trying to substantially be consistent with the master plan recommendations for the property. And if you're familiar with it, the preliminary plan contemplates and allows up to 1,410,000 square feet of building floor area on the property. The long-term build out that the Trammell Crow team is moving towards would seek slightly more than that, and I'll show that in a moment, but that would require going in and amending those prior approval documents. And as I said, that's the long-term plan. In the near term, the near-term site plan will be for about half of that amount of floor area, so it would be within the allowance for the property. So now to the plan. When I say half of that, this is the phase one, and this is where we're going in 2022. Again, there will be a first site plan that's going to address for the ground lease portion of the Bellward property, and that is everything to the north of this east-west road that's going to be created, that's known as Bellward Campus Drive. To the northern portion of this, it's approximately 66 acres. The initial plan, the site plan for which we'll have a pre-submission meeting in May, is going to address, as Ellen said, the roads within the property boundaries, utilities, some of the associated sidewalks and landscaping and site preparation elements. But the concept with the buildings for the phase one of this will follow, like later in July, will be for these 3 office buildings that you see, these mid-rise lab office buildings, and these 2 parking structures, as well as the open space improvements and some key amenities, including, we're going to be laying out the plans for Muddy Branch Park and how that would be constructed under the applicable county processes. The larger concept, I'll get to in a second, but again, this slide really just shows what some of those elements are that are identified in the master plan, and that would be implemented with this pending site plan. The Mission Hills Preserve, which is a planted buffer approximately 200 feet wide along the northern property line, will come in with this plan. The Muddy Branch Park, which is going to run directly down Muddy Branch Road, you see in here. These are very preliminary ideas for what that could look like. But the various open space improvements, the sidewalks, the walking paths, you'll see that the historic farm is outside of the site plan area. It's to the south of the road, but the concept is keeping in mind the master plan's recommendations for preserving views of the farm. And there is also a small retail pavilion that the team is looking at that would be part of the plan, and you can sort of see it in the center there. And then moving to the phase 2 plan, where this project would ultimately try to go after getting approval for amendments to the applicable preliminary plan, would be a 7 building program. You can see them in sort of the white color here, and expansions of the parking garages. The parking garages would be phased to provide parking for those additional buildings. Otherwise, the open space elements and everything would already be in place with the previous site plan, we anticipate. That is a very high level overview of this. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, but I'm happy to put it back up at any point. And with that, we can open it up for questions.
I just want to remind everyone, we do have a website, which is greatsenecalifesciences.com. You're welcome to visit the site and learn. The link to the concept plan is there. And also for the May 10th meeting, if you wanted to attend the May 10th pre-submission meeting for the infrastructure site plan, there's a registration option on the website as well. So that's greatsenecalifesciences.com.
Okay, so we'll field questions. Who wants to get started?
Quick question. What's the occupancy of the first, how many people on the site on phase 1 and how many on phase 2?
Sure. So I share that we're working with a confidential user that's focused on biotherapeutics, degenerative neurological diseases. Their program currently is around, I would say, 55 to 60% lab and about 40 to 45% office and collaboration. So their headcount for the first phase of the occupancy, which would be 2 to 3 of the initial buildings, is still being determined. And as that plan evolves, I'll be able to share that with a higher level of accuracy.
Gary,
Yeah, hi.
excuse me, can everybody introduce themselves before they ask a question?
Sure. Gary Ehrenrich, Montgomery County DOT. It's nice to see everybody. My question is actually a couple. One, because of the previous preliminary plan, I'm assuming you don't need to do any traffic studies. You have the adequate public facilities approval, or is this concept plan, phase 1, phase 2, going to require you to go back and re-examine traffic and transit? Certain assumptions were made when the preliminary plan was approved and the master plan was approved about modal share and transit accessibility on the Quarter Cities Transitway and interchange improvements and other access improvements. So have you re-looked at that, and do you plan to bring it up to date?
So Gary, there is an existing APF approval for this property for this build out of density, and that I believe is going to be the starting point for that analysis. But yes, it's going to be part of the scope of review, and we will be working to understand how that plays out for this development concept. I think one important thing will be that those issues will likely come up when we get to the site plan for the buildings, and probably that would be when the floor area comes online in the plan review. But the initial plan that is just roads and utilities, we probably won't have those answers in that first part of the process.
Okay. The second part of my question is, and again, I may not remember this correctly, but I thought there was going to be soccer fields and public access on the Muddy Branch side of the project to serve the community and community functions. I think what you're showing is a park, but not showing public access and sports fields. Has that changed, or do I just have it wrong?
No, you actually have it right, but what the difference is that we don't have those details. We only have placeholders in the drawing for purposes of that concept plan review. The master plan has a recommendation, I believe, for a play field that would be part of what is provided in the park, but all of that, we're just not there yet. We just have sort of, I think the way to think of the concept plan submission is it's really just a massing and layout diagram with all of the details to be provided.
Right, but for infrastructure.
But you're right. Those are the master plan recommendations that we will be designing to.
Okay, thank you. It's just that I would think, depending on the use of that land, will have some infrastructure requirements associated with it, lighting, power, whatever types of grass and irrigation, drainage. So I just think that the layout is pretty important, and the topography would be.
Okay. Who else? Questions? Usually not a shy crowd.
So I didn't want to take any time from questions, but this is Mitch Bonato with Johns Hopkins. Do you mind if I add a comment regarding the larger campus, not specific to this site plan? So just going back to the square footage and APF questions. So just, the preliminary plan was for approval up to 4.7 million square feet with the initial APF tranche of the 1.4 that was talked about, currently approved under the staging requirements. So I think the goal in the near future is to stay within the 1.4 and stay within that APF requirements just as a campus as a whole. And then sometime in the future, have a larger discussion about total density over the 1.4. But the reality is nowhere near approaching the 4.7 long term. So just when you look at the density that's shown here, even with the proposed Trammell Crow second phase and the MOB and sort of what's left, you're not getting to 4 million square feet at the end of the day in any of our lifetime, right? So I think that's part of the future discussion also. What's the reality of the ultimate, full build out of the campus? And it's somewhere between the 1.4 and the 4.7, but I think nowhere near the 4.7, even though all of the road network and the park dedications and the preserve areas and everything else that was part of the preliminary plan approval was all based on the 4.7. I don't really see us ever approaching that number long term.
Yeah, hi, this is Steve. We can look at that down the road. I think that the 1.4, the reality is the 1.4 is the existing approval. The 4.7 was another concept plan, I think, that was done and was required in the master plan. And so that was kind of the ultimate vision, but there really is not an entitlement associated with anything above the 1.4. So anything beyond that, as we discussed, I think in this, you'll have to, that'll be part of the future master plan and expansion of the available development capacity. So got lots of good discussions to have on this, and this looks like a good start. I will mention that I think Tamika Graham is available to talk a little bit more about the concept plan from the park and planning standpoint, to kind of give people an understanding of how that process works for us, so that everybody can have a fuller understanding of exactly what a concept plan is. I think over time we've talked about preliminary plans and we've talked about site plans, but we haven't talked a lot about concept plans. So Tamika can give us some more information on that once everybody's done with their questions for Trammell Crow and Company and Johns Hopkins. And we thank you guys for all this information, by the way.
Okay, I don't think there's any more questions. Phil, did you want to?
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments. I mean, Eric, we didn't have a chance to meet yet. Did get a chance to meet with Ellen, and as a committee, obviously, you're looking at an overall density, as Steve was just, saying, and Mitch, that is well below what we had talked about, a few years ago, which I think changes the ball game quite a bit. But, we're still, I think as we get further down the road, I think everybody recognizes that it's very early in the game. So I think everybody's being pretty reserved with their questions. But as a committee, our job is to look at some of the objectives of the master plan, and then see how the proposed plans align with those objectives. And so in particular, the things that I look at when I look at this concept and wonder are not necessarily, it looks like there's plenty of open space, which is great, but I look for placemaking and or activated spaces that were in the were called for in the original master plan, especially around things like the CCT station, which was supposed to be sort of a public square area, which I believe is no longer called for in this plan, and so on. And we're for overall, our objective in the GSSC area is to avoid building insular campus, suburban campus-like settings, and building more of those in an area that already has plenty, and that what we're hoping to move away from. And so our hope that I think what we'll be discussing, certainly the questions I'll be asking as we go forward, are how Trammell Crow and Johns Hopkins will be working together to create something that kind of bridges that gap and is less of an insular campus and instead an inviting area with public spaces that integrates with the communities around it. It's wonderful that it provides plenty of open spaces, but does it provide reasons for people to enter the campus, or is it just another black a green hole in our region, or a set green and white hole in our region that everybody avoids as they're driving by 28 and Muddy Branch, right? Which we've got plenty of those, and I don't think that's what the GSSC is calling for. So
Phil, I appreciate those comments, and I share that our objectives are largely aligned. I think as the life sciences business is evolving, and it's evolving very rapidly, you need to have a rich level of amenities on these campuses that are not only for the community, but also for ultimately the scientists, the technicians, and the people that are doing really great things in these spaces. So I share with you, we're studying this we're studying it extensively. And in fact, I was in San Diego last week, touring probably about 15 different buildings that represent similar type of mid-rise designs that we're able to successfully activate and try to create a sense of campus with some retail amenities, some really great walking paths, and many of the things that we envision for this campus longer term as we work through this design. I share that Gensler is our primary design architect. We also have probably one of the best landscape design firms in the country working with us. So there are lots of great ideas that are being socialized and analyzed to really align not only with the community, but also to make this a great live, work type location for those that, again, are doing really great things related to research, life, in life sciences.
Quick question. Is the 800,000 square feet, is that all going to be occupied by Johns Hopkins employees, research, doctors, facilities, or are there plans that a certain amount of this space is also going to be open for leasing to other organizations?
I'll let, certainly I'll answer, but please, like Ms. Bonanno can certainly, there is no occupancy on behalf of Johns Hopkins in these buildings. So Mitch, if you'd like to add to that, please, or clarify.
Yeah, sure. This is not an intended project for Johns Hopkins specifically. Only Eric and Trammell Crow can talk about the company they're working with. It is a company that is in the same circles as a lot of Johns Hopkins research, but this is not a Johns Hopkins specific use. So the MOB Ambulatory Surgery Center, the last site plan we did, that is Johns Hopkins specific. Johns Hopkins Medical, these future buildings are not specifically intended for Johns Hopkins.
Okay, so thank you. So the 146,000 square foot surgical thing is Hopkins, and the rest is open to whoever you wants to lease in that particular environment.
Well, I'll let Eric answer, but he's working with a specific tenant for 2 of the 3 buildings as of right now. So the hope is that specific tenant will be the occupant of 2 of the 3 buildings, and then I think the third one is not spoken for. But don't let me answer for Trammell Crow.
Well, Mitch, I think you said it well. We're deep into programming with a certain user that has some very exciting things going on. And I think we're trying to create a certain theme in around how we develop the first phase related to certain subset of life science, so we have complementary life science users on this portion of the campus. I think this is something that we're incredibly excited about. We have truly an extraordinary opportunity to create something that is world class.
Considering the size of the facility that you're talking about, it obviously it's not going to be inhabited by a new bio upstart with 70 employees. Obviously, it's a grander scale in your thinking, which is fine. Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Tamika, are you on?
Yes, good evening. I'm here. Sorry, I hear a little bit of feedback.
Okay.
I will share my screen. So my name is Tamika Graham. I'm with the Mid-County Regulatory Team. I have a couple of slides just to talk specifically about the concept plan review process, just because we're reviewing a concept plan. And I think some of the differences came out a little bit in the prior presentation, but I just wanted to add a little bit more insight to what we look at from the regulatory perspective. So one thing that I will point out is that a concept plan is typically optional, and it comes before all of the other plans that we typically review, such as sketch. That's if a plan needs incentive density, or a preliminary plan, or a site plan. But in this case, we're looking at a site plan that's required because there's specific language within the 2010 Great Seneca Science Corridor Master Plan. And so it specifically calls out properties that are 20 acres or more that are adjacent to the CCT stations. And then you can see there are specific properties that are called out. And specific elements to the plans that should be paid close attention to. So this is one of the reasons why you're looking at this concept plan for the site, because it's well over 20 acres. Some of the things that we look at, again, this is not preliminary or site plan, but staff does take the time to evaluate what comes in against the zoning ordinance, against subdivision regulations, against guidelines, against the master plan. And I should also take a step back and say, from our application process, we do have a list of items that should be submitted with the concept plan, but the idea is also to be flexible. So typically when we see a concept plan, we may just be looking at minimal information. But again, because we're looking at it through the lens of the GSSC master plan, there are certain items that we should be looking at. The purpose of it is really for us to identify a lot of issues early on. I think it saves a lot of time and money. That way, the applicant isn't getting to the first application and then they're hearing a whole slew of issues from staff that could have been worked out earlier on. The concept plan is also a free application for applicants, and so it's something that I think is typically pursued by applicants. Most of the time, applicants may submit a list of specific concerns that they want staff as well as the other government agencies to review, and we'll take our time to address those specific questions to help the applicant as they shape the plan and think about design and engineering items that may come later down the road. We also spend a significant amount of time between the concept submission and the interagency meeting is where the applicant will receive the final comments on the concept plan. Is there that we try to present coordinated recommendation to the applicant with respect to, all of the applicable standards and, some of the things that we expect at the next phase. The concept plan is not binding in any way. There is not a resolution. There's not a staff report. We do obviously have all of the comments from all the regulatory review agencies that gets appended to the concept plan. And then from there, we typically outline a path forward for the formal application submission. As you heard this evening, usually the applicant may identify what type of timeline they're on, and then we try to work with them in terms of getting their next steps in terms of like the pre-submission meeting with staff, and then as you heard, there's also a pre-application meeting with the community. I will say from an administrative point of view, well, you can see here, there's a little outline for kind of the administrative process. It does get assigned a project number. It's uploaded to DAIC the same way that you can find other applications. But some of the differences are tied to public notification. So concept plans are not required to have written noticing. A pre-application community meeting prior to the concept plan is not required. The planning department doesn't send out notices. The two primary ways that the public is notified about concept plans is through our interagency meetings, formerly called our DRC meetings, and then also online, as I mentioned, through our DAIC website. So as you heard, the concept plan is very high level. We'll look at permitted uses, square footage that the applicant envisions, the building footprints. Is really important for us to see an existing conditions plan where any type of significant environmental features and constraints are laid out. And then we may look at other things like general circulation. Public comment is also welcome during the concept plan, similar to what you all are familiar with. And then the concept plan ends at our interagency meeting. So that's where all of the other agencies, MCDOT, DPS, DHCA, and all of the others listed there will basically do a round table of all of their issues. The more information we have at the time of concept plan, the more feedback we can provide. But again, it sometimes just depends on the level of detail that's available at that time. And then in the case of the IAC, similar to any other project, we will bring a concept plan before you for discussion. I just threw in an example just because the PSTA, I'm pretty sure is fresh in everyone's mind. The PSTA also went through a concept plan requirement because it was over 20 acres. And this just gives you an idea of what you may see at concept plan. It kind of looks similar to the final, but you take a closer look, you see a lot of things that have substantially changed from concept all the way down to final approval. And this gives you an idea of, the way that we would try to organize feedback to the applicant. From the concept plan, the applicant is then ready to move forward to a formal application, either starting with the subdivision plan and then to site plan. This gives you a better idea of the process. Again, it goes through DRC, but the review period is substantially longer. And then we not just, we don't go through one cycle of reviews, but we go through a minimum of 3 review cycles across all the agencies that are they're listed there. And then, of course, there's public noticing that's required once you get past concept plan. And then that culminates with the public hearing. And then I just wanted to point out that, you know, once we get past concept, there's still a number of refinements that occur to plans between, you know, the initial submittal with preliminary plan, what you can see on the left here. It's much different than the concept plan, but it's also much different than what was approved. So that's just to point out that this is a iterative process. And you can also track concept plans as well as any of our other regulatory plans on MC Atlas. This is just a quick example of PSTA site and Bellwood Farm that we're discussing tonight. So that's hopefully helpful to you, and I can available to answer additional questions about the differences between the concept and other regulatory applications.
Okay, thank you, Tamika. It's a great refresher. So somebody has their hand up, but I don't know who it is. Let me see if I can figure it out.
It's me, Marilyn Jane Briggs with
Oh,
the
hi,
Universities at Shady Grove. Hey,
Yeah.
I had a question. I guess for Eric or someone. Are there any anticipated waivers or design exceptions that were submitted as part of the preliminary plan?
Eric, do you want me to, I mean, as part of the, do you mean as part of the concept plan, or are you referring to the?
Yeah, I noticed in her last slide presentation under concept, it said identify anticipated waivers or design exceptions. And so it made me wonder, have there been any that were identified as part of this concept plan?
I don't believe that anything formal was requested with the concept plan. I think that the layout is, you know, in the course of evaluating how the site lays out and the roads lay out and et cetera, that's always possible that, you know, waivers or design exceptions could be requested, but that would happen with the site plan. One place that I think that could happen is in trying to get the roads to lay out on the site. They may be looking at, you know, it's possible they may be looking at, you know, amending the forest conservation plan or something for, you know, encroachments. But I think all of those are technical issues that remain to be figured out when they get the application materials together.
Okay, so I'm taking that as answer is no, there hasn't been any identified to date.
That's correct.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? So you said the site plan you're thinking of, when did you say September? August, September?
The site plan that will include the buildings and open space details would be likely a July timeframe submission. And the site plan that will precede that would deal with, you know, roads and utilities would be much sooner, possibly a May submission, and there is a pre-submission community meeting for that. That notices will be going out, if you haven't already started to receive them. That date for that meeting will be May 10th. There will be, by that point of that meeting, more to show about what that plan looks like. It's currently in process.
Okay.
Marilyn, this is Ellen Corin. I just want to thank you for having us come to your meeting today. We really appreciate it. And again, our website is greatsenecalifesciences.com if you want to register for the pre-submission meeting for the site plan on May 10th. And with that, I think Eric, Chris, and I will sign off. And thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing the plans as they move forward.
Okay, take care.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you all.
Everyone be well.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Okay, I think that the next thing on the agenda is, Steve, are you going to talk about the open meetings?
Marilyn, just before we move on, why don't we see if anybody on the committee has any immediate questions, comments, or feedback that they want to offer on that, the Trammell Crow presentation before we, obviously let's keep it, quick, but Tim.
And I would also offer that if anyone would be more comfortable with me recusing myself and hopping off for 5 minutes and hopping back on, please, don't be hesitant to ask as well.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate that.
Hey, this is Mark Prater. Mitch, you could stay on for this. Just two things. The Ellen and team have been great about outreach to the Mission Hills community. So my house backs onto the property, and they've held 2 sessions already with myself and my neighbors. So that was much appreciated. I really like the transparency there. And I'll just, on record, traffic is one of my biggest concerns here. I think the original traffic study that was done just had erroneous assumptions and was flawed. And, that area is already a mess, and putting in the new left turn lanes that they're putting in now is not going to help. The plan I saw, I don't see how 75% of that traffic or of the cars coming out of that area don't dump onto Muddy Branch. It's just where the parking lots are. So that's going to be my concern going forward. And I'd like to see, a lot of effort in that area.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
Tim, do you have your hands raised? So do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just a quick one. I was late to the meeting and missed most of the presentation. I was tied up on another call. So is this taped where I can review it again? Does anybody have an answer for that? Marilyn, your mic's off.
Yes. So it looks like it's being recorded.
Okay.
Yes,
I apologize for that. It was unavoidable, and I was hoping there was chit chat going on delaying the presentation, but here we are.
Yeah, it was pretty quick, but I mean, Tim, it was a pretty high level conversation, and I don't know, have you seen their concept plan already? And did you see the slides, or do you know that there's a website, Great Seneca Science Center.com, I believe it is, where you can go and look at the concept.
I have a copy of the general of the submission.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. So,
yes.
But I will go to what was the website again? Great Seneca
Science Center.com.
Great Seneca
Life Science.
Life Science.
Great Seneca Life Science.com.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, guys.
I think it's sciences, plural. Great Seneca Life Sciences.com.
Yeah. I can't read my own writing.
Yeah. So we were pretty quiet for this presentation, Tim. Atypically, I mean, since it was high level and early, and so we're I'm thinking everybody assumes they'll have more chances to talk with Trammell Crow, and Mitch will be around also.
And after reviewing the just a quick note, reviewing the application, I reached out to Brewer and Early, whatever the law firm is. Anyway, they had negated to talk about the deed restrictions on the property in their submission for the application, and that was an oversight because the engineer had done the application, so they have since rectified that, and just FYI. So, Mitch, you're probably aware of that. So, I do think it was just an oversight of the engineer, or he was unaware, either one, but they've taken care of it since then.
Thanks.
Art, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a a comment on process. And that is when we have large pieces of real estate that are going to be leased to unknown tenants, and this is not a criticism of anybody, but the process is we're asked to make judgments about applicability of things like safety, traffic, et cetera. But we're really not able to look at that accurately because we don't know who's going to be there or how many are going to be there. And so we're sort of I'm noting that it seems to me that a lot of decisions and judgments have to be made in a bit of a vacuum, especially when you don't know exactly who is going to be occupying the facility and what they're going to be doing and how many they're going to necessarily have doing it. We talked about the ABC buildings on Alexandria real estate that are now being built as we speak. And to me, it's like the planning is you're wise too late. And it's just a question of process that we don't seem to be able to get commitments or firm understanding about what kind of restrictions the county should impose upon these facilities if we can't have too much traffic or we can't have too much risk. Sorry, sir, you can't have an Ebola research facility right next to our new development or something like that. So it's frustrating that we do the planning, but we don't do the planning with a lot of fact. And I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Art. Gary, did your hand come up and down?
Yeah, it did. Thank you. I was just saying that it's a little frustrating to me. And I know it was already mentioned, I think by Mark, about the lack of traffic analysis. I mean, yes, this is smaller than what was perhaps analyzed before, but conditions have vastly changed. Besides the other developments, I mean, the corridor forward, the status of the Corridor Cities Transitway, bus service and access, a TDM plan, commitments that we had previously, non-auto drive mode share, things that are in the plan, interchanges that are not going to get built, which probably we don't want to get built, road widenings and things like that, which we're probably not going to do. So I just think we need to know the direction of the traffic that's coming in, where the directional issues, where the bottlenecks will be, how they look at resolving some of those bottlenecks. I saw on the plan some reservation or some reference to a transit station. How does that street work? It didn't look. Is there a median in it with lanes on both sides? How does the circulation within the site work? Those are some pretty basic stuff. Intersection with Muddy Branch on that Spine Street, intersections with Darnestown. Are we still precluded from direct access from Sam Eig, as we had been in previously? I mean, these are just logical questions that we have. I have. I assume others may have, and I just think that they're very clever, and I don't blame them, coming in at the 1.4 million, so they don't have to really throw off the balance and do additional analyses. But then they'll come in with the whatever it is, the phase 2 for whatever, for another several million, and they're going to say, well, we've already made those decisions and we've already built our infrastructure, and so is the infrastructure sufficient to accommodate the full build out? And those are logical questions, and someone just needs to examine it.
So who would be the appropriate party that would do that?
Well, I think it's the developer that's responsible, but the problem and the issue is, what should the developer assume as the background condition, the future condition? are the op lanes in or not? You know, British Cities Transway in or out? The Great Seneca bus service that the county is funding and advancing, you know, the corridor, whatever it was, the corridor connections in the corridor forward bus service or community connections. There's a whole bunch of things in there, and we don't know. That someone needs to kind of sit down and say, okay, if these things happen, this is the results. So I suspect it's the developer that's responsible, but with consultation with all of the parties that review the studies and maybe, you know, obviously the public's interest as well. But I don't attend the DRC, so I don't know what has come up in that discussion.
I think I would ditto what Gary is saying, as well as Mark said as well. I was curious how they were going to do an infrastructure plan without a site development plan. You know, how do you analyze road capacity in intersections, or how many people or how many cars are you going to have? And they didn't answer, you know, Art's question about how many people do you expect. You know, they talked about percentage of lab to office, which isn't saying I expect 1,500 cars, you know, to ultimately be on this site. So I don't know how you do roadways and curb cuts and layouts and stormwater without having the whole piece. But can't the county ask for a traffic impact study?
Hi, this is Steve. I think I'll jump in for just a sec. And I want to just start by going back to the discussion about what a concept plan is. And so at this stage, all we are reviewing is the concept plan. And again, as was said, the more information that is submitted, the better the feedback the different agencies can give. But there is, beyond some real basics, there are not requirements at this stage for things like traffic studies. So at the next, that just means that those are things that will have to be taken up in the next stages of submission. I learned tonight that that there will be an infrastructure site plan, which is something I've rarely seen. So I'm not quite sure how that will, you know, how that fits in terms of the sequence of things, and we'll have to talk that through and figure that out. But Gary and everybody else who's talked on this, I would say that there is going to be a point down the road when all of those details are going to have to be nailed down, and they will have to be nailed down, I would think, no later than the site plan that comes in with the buildings on it and the density and the capacity and the traffic at that point may need to be reanalyzed. But at this stage, that's just that is not a piece that was submitted for examination, and so we don't really have any feedback to give on it. But I think your points are all well taken.
I had one more question, and I don't know why I remember here. I wasn't around for the first round of master plan approval or the concept site plan or the development. Were there like development restrictions that it had to be for John Hopkins use or anything like that? Is that a ground lease, or is that a gray fuzzy area that my history doesn't? I just remember hearing comments over the years around something, and I don't know what I'm hearing to raise the question. I just thought I want to know, what do I remember?
Yeah. Mitch, do you want to take that, or Tim, or
Sure.
Steve? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, there's a recorded deed with deed restrictions in it. It's public. I can circulate a copy to this group if anyone wishes. But it was part of the original bargain purchase of the property from the Banks family, that there were certain restrictions agreed to in the deed, that there have, just let everyone read it. It's probably the easiest, but the intent was that it was not just going to be speculative commercial or multifamily development, that it was going to be used for something that aligns with the mission of Johns Hopkins and what we do and the research we do. And we believe the tenant that they're talking with does that and fits that. But it's more specifically restrictive, like we can't do multifamily housing. We couldn't subdivide this and do a neighborhood of single family homes. So again, I'm happy to circulate it, and Tim, feel free to chime in as well. But the intent is that it's for life science that has some connection with the mission and the research of Johns Hopkins. It doesn't say Johns Hopkins has to be a tenant or has to occupy the space.
Well, we can get in the weeds with this later as we find out more of the details, and an overall thing, yes, there was a donative intent with this as well, besides the language in there. But so I think that as we learn more, we'll get to more of the details of that. And the original intent maybe was to have Johns Hopkins be an owner-occupied campus, but we've obviously that's not going to happen now. So, a ground lease with Hopkins that falls within the purpose of the deed restrictions and the donative intent would, be satisfied. A perfect example is the surgical center that Hopkins is building, and a very good example. So that, I guess that's all I would have to say at the moment. But there are well, we'll just go down and see what when we get the details, what's what.
I would assume that any of those issues associated with that are outside the purview of GSSC advisory board as well. So mine was a curiosity question more than anything, maybe. So
Actually,
I just don't know if
I was
there's any implication.
I was going to say, Jane, I think there is, because as part of the master plan 10 years ago and the discussion of the Bellward Farm, there was lots of discussion by our current county executive, among others, about what percent of the building would be occupied by medical related uses, or the complex, as opposed to having back office accounting or other sorts of non-direct medical related research. So I think that is important. That is an important question. I don't know whether there's anything in the plan that specifies that when you go to individual sites. But I know that was a topic of extensive discussions.
So I did have one question, Mitch. Maybe you can answer this, and maybe this was more for Crow and Trammell. But the subdivision of the upper half portion versus the lower half portion, and it requires that because of the ground. Could you explain why it requires a subdivision?
So it's already a separate parcel. So there are 3 parcels of Bellward, A, B, and Bellward Campus Drive. So the right of way for Bellward Campus Drive has already been earmarked for dedication to the county, and there already is a parcel A and a parcel B. So I think they were talking about further subdivision. So the way if you look at their site plan, right? So there's a lot of.
Well, yeah, but the original A and B was the original campus that was built, and then there was the balance of undeveloped Bellward. There wasn't a north portion, a south portion, and the east portion. That would make 3 lots.
Maybe I'm mistaken, but I think the balance of Bellward that is left today is at least 2 separate parcels.
No, that would require, besides the preservation parcel, which is 10 acres, there was an A and a B. The B was the part that's already, Bellward campus on the
Well,
East.
I tell you what, we'll resolve that
Yeah.
very quickly. We have we have a certified site plan for the MOB. And
Okay.
we're actually doing our record plat at the moment, which is in processing with county staff. So there should be no question about what exists today.
Because
with
it's mentioned in the application that there had to be a subdivision of that northern portion. So that's why I'm pretty sure that still needs to be subdivided. And I was wondering why it has to be subdivided if you're the owner of the, if JHU is the owner of the ground lease. Why does it have to be subdivided? And I just don't know that much about development, so that's a.
Yeah, I think I would have to confer with Trammell Crow about what they wrote in their application. Not sure if that's the case.
Okay, fair enough.
Hi. Before we move on, I actually, this is a question I'm throwing out there for future discussion rather than for now. But as I was reviewing, and Tim, this is kind of related to your point that the property being, kind of now we've got the north area with Trammell Crow, we've got the the southeast, I guess, area with or southwestern area with Johns Hopkins Medical Campus, and then we've got the preservation area, and then we've got the southeastern area that's not currently planned for development yet. I was wondering who controls is the preservation area under county control? Is there and is there a plan for the preservation area at this point in time? Is that a Hopkins kind of responsibility? Is there is there any plan at this point in time for how that preservation area will be used? And again, I don't know if I think I could see myself having a number of questions on this, so I don't know if it's worth discussing now. I just kind of want to throw it out there. If there's a quick answer, well, John says that's Johns Hopkins, and maybe we can table it for later. But yeah, Mitch, who controls that?
So it's all the ground is owned by Johns Hopkins, and the intent is that there will be a campus association that will be formed among the property owners, similar to what was done at the Montgomery County campus when we own that. The way the preliminary plan is written, the county does not take ownership of any of the land, even the land that's designated as perpetual preserve. So there will be a campus association created that will be maintained by the occupants of the campus, with Johns Hopkins retaining ownership of it until such time that the land is actually put into the association. So the county, as far as I understand it, does not intend to take ownership of any land of Bellward. That doesn't mean that can't change in the future. So, like Muddy Branch Park, and there's discussion about would it make more sense? It's just dedicated to the county, right? Have the county own it versus us owning it and maintaining it. So I think some of those things will play out in the site plan process, but like, for example, the historic preserve in the center, the 10 acres, that'll be a separate site plan that Johns Hopkins will file to propose how we intend to maintain those the historic structures that are the contributing historic structures, and open space and other things of that in accordance with the preliminary plan.
Got it. Thank you. I have a number of questions related to that. At the end of the day, I would hope. It's interesting that we never really have discussed that in the 10 years that we've been on this committee. Not once do I think we've ever actually discussed, well, what's going to happen with that old farmhouse and that barn and stuff like that. And now that development is actually happening on Bellward, and you look at it and say, well, damn, there are some real interesting opportunities, that, and you want, to make that a public amenity. And I wonder how that aligns with what what is deeded, what the family had in mind, what what Hopkins has in mind, and so on. And again, I think that's a longer discussion than.
Well, and we anticipated this causing that question to come up again, right? To bring that to the front of the discussion, and we are looking at that, and it will be separate from the Trammell Crow site plan, but we do plan to engage in a local community process associated with that to get input and have that be a very open project. Like, we're going to do it. The 10 acres is going to stay there. We're going to approve it. We would love to have it be something that the community would embrace and really like and satisfies the desires of the local community. So for probably a presentation for another night, but definitely understanding that will come up in this context.
Thanks. Okay, sorry. We probably should move on to our second presentation, and I'm the one delaying us. So, Marilyn, back to you.
Okay. Yeah, okay, thanks. I think this is a great discussion. So thank you, everyone. Steve.
Hi, it's me again. Yes, I'll be real quick. Just a couple of things. Wanted to mention to you in particular that these GSSC IAC meetings have always been public meetings, but we are going to be enhancing our publicity for, I think, all of our meetings, all of our public meetings. As the county actually has an open meetings requirement. It's a legal requirement, and we are just making sure that we are fully making it clear that which meetings are public and the ones that the public can attend. So as a part of that, we are going to be probably more broadly publicizing these IAC meetings as public meetings, and anybody, any member of the public is welcome to attend. As part of that, when this committee first started, again, the meetings were public, and there was a discussion at the beginning about how the public would be allowed to participate. This is still an implementation advisory committee meeting. It is the committee's meeting, and we want to make sure that you all have the ability to hear the information you need to hear, to have the discussions you need to have. And if there are any decisions to be made, any votes to be taken, only committee members can vote. That being said, it is kind of up to the discretion of the community. The public is welcome to listen in. We will probably have a little fuller discussion at our next meeting about how you guys feel about maybe allowing the public at some point during the meeting to make comments if they want to share them. That'll be something we'll take up next week, but just anticipating that there may be more members of the public listening in as we publicize these meetings more broadly. It probably makes sense to revisit your protocols as a committee for allowing the public to comment how you want to do that, so that the public has a chance to express comments at an appropriate time and allow you still to do your business. So we'll put a little time on the agenda next time for you to be able to do that. The other thing, I know I came in a little bit late, but I heard that Jessica was introducing Aaron Savage, who's now on the Mid-County Planning Team, and will be working with the Great Seneca Plan as well. And I don't know if Jessica, if I understand that Aaron has offered at our next meeting also as an item to help do a walkthrough of the Development Application Information Center, the DAIC that we've talked about. If the committee thinks that would be useful, I understand that Aaron has volunteered to take people for a walk through the DAIC so you can see how to access the plans and information that's on that system. So if the committee thinks that would be valuable, and again, that's my understanding. I didn't hear that straight from Aaron, so I hope I'm not saying anything out of place there. But if the committee's interested in that, we'll add that to our next. And there's Aaron. Hi, Aaron.
Hi guys, nice to meet you all. Yeah, you're correct, Steve. So yeah, I just thought it would be helpful. I heard there might be some interest in finding out how to navigate DIC and even sort of understanding the naming conventions of the files. I know that's sort of a little confusing. prior to working in Mid-County, I just transitioned actually from working in the intake and regulatory coordination department. So I have a lot of experience with the file naming and you know, navigating through DISC. So I could definitely help out with that and sort of just do a walkthrough tutorial if that would be helpful for you guys. But nice to meet you all.
And I think that's all we got. Yeah, Phil? Oh, you're just saying hi. Got it. Okay, I think that's all I've got, so we can move on to our next presentation, if that sounds good to folks. Does anybody have any desire to have a walkthrough of the DAIC at the next meeting? Would that be helpful to people? Any immediate responses one way or another?
Yes.
Yes, okay, got one yes. I'm sure you speak for many, so we'll go with that. Thanks very much. Okay.
Steve, I would say in that line though, sometimes I find if I have to go into the park and planning, I get lost. But when Marilyn sent us the link to the and I could go in and see what 12 documents were in there, it was very helpful. Because then I didn't have to navigate in. I went, it was a link right to the page.
Right.
So that was very cool. I enjoyed getting the links and not having to go find the plan number, et cetera. So.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So Marilyn and Phil, I'll turn it back over to you to transition to our next presentation.
Okay, I've lost the plot. So Phil, do you have it in front of you?
Yeah, the next presentation I think is on corridor forward. And I'm sorry, I don't have in front of me who's presenting. Who would that be? Yeah,
Jesse McGowan.
Jesse McGowan. Well, nice to see you, Jesse, and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So you can hear me okay? Great. My name is Jessie Cohn McGowan. I'm a transportation planner in the Countywide Planning and Policy Division at the Planning Department. And I'll walk through today a little bit about Corridor Forward. I know you've had several presentations about this over the past 2 years, so I'm going to kind of keep this pretty brief and just talk about what's changed since the last time we met with you all. So just as a reminder, Corridor Forward is the I-270 transit plan. The purpose of this project was really to prioritize and narrow down the big list of transit options that could improve accessibility along the I-270 corridor. And the intent was to develop a clear strategy to ensure that resources were directed to advantageous projects. So I just mentioned that we've kind of met with you over the past 2 years. So this project really kicked off in 2020, where we started with a list of 15 different transit options and their different characteristics and modes. We narrowed those down to 6 options that had a greater level of detail of analysis that was conducted in 2021. We solidified feedback and priorities in spring and summer of 2021. And then I think the last time we presented to you all was our preliminary recommendations last fall in October, where we showed what our initial recommendations were. And so this past several months, we've been meeting with the planning board as well as council. And so now we actually do have a plan that's been approved by council. We're still going through the adoption process with the planning board and the commission, but the content is really kind of set at this point. And so I'll walk through a little bit about what that entails. So the approved plan recommendations really fall into 4 categories. There's a near-term transit network, the long-term transit vision, supporting recommendations, and regional opportunities. So the near-term transit network is shown on the right, primarily in the green and more periwinkle colors. So the really top priority of Corridor Forward are the already master planned BRT projects of the Maryland 355 BRT, as well as the Veers Mill Road BRT that you can't really see too much on this map. Another really big piece of the near-term transit network are the corridor connectors. The corridor connectors are dedicated transit lanes that provide a network that connect communities along the corridor cities. And we really see the corridor connectors as a re-envisioning of the CCT, something that makes the CCT more implementable. more feasible to be implemented. And so I'll touch on some of these other items later in the slides.
I'm sorry, Josie, can you repeat what you just said about the CCT?
Sure. So the corridor connectors are a reimagining of the CCT. So this recommendation would, in essence, replace the CCT with new dedicated transit lanes that serve all of the same communities, but in a way that we see as more implementable.
Got it. Mhm.
So two of the changes that were made since the last time we came to you and since the planning board draft were that the corridor connectors now better align with the Great Seneca Transit Network. I'm not sure if MCDOT has presented to you all on that, but that's, you're nodding, Marilyn. So, a network of enhanced bus service through the life sciences area. In addition, the corridor connectors really maintain the connections to CCT communities and leverage areas that already had CCT dedications. So I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail about those two changes that I just mentioned. In black on the screen, you can see where the Great Seneca Transit Network is planned, and you can see how that overlaps pretty heavily with the dedicated transit lanes included in the corridor connectors. So we made a few changes from the planning board draft, for example, adding dedicated bus lanes on Redland and Picard. We also added a new corridor connector that adds dedicated bus lanes on Fields Road, to Coverly and Brochard. And these are areas that the Great Seneca Transit Network was already planning to have dedicated bus lanes. So we're really kind of leveraging the planning that MCDOT has done, and better aligning the two planning efforts. I also just want to touch on how the corridor connectors really maintain the connections to the CCT communities. So you can see this line that's white with the black outline is the originally master plan CCT, and you can see kind of looking overall at the corridor as well as in this zoomed in area of the Life Sciences Center that there is a lot of overlap between the two networks. Some of the key changes that we've made is that we've removed the interchange here at Fields, and so that's an expensive aspect of the CCT that made it more challenging to implement. And so by rerouting the corridor connectors to not include that overpass, sorry, I think I said interchange, but I meant overpass, that is an expense that's been removed. In addition, we removed the dedicated lanes for the CCT that ran along this segment that was about 3 miles. And this segment doesn't really directly serve any land use. And so we saw that by removing this and instead routing the buses onto 355, we could reduce the cost of the project and create something, again, that's more implementable. And so in addition to the corridor connectors, there's really a range of recommendations included in Corridor Forward. And so with the way that we've restructured the plan based on the council's feedback, there's kind of those 4 different categories of recommendations. So I've talked a bit about what's in the near-term transit network, mentioning the 355 BRT and the Veers Mill Road BRT, as well as the corridor connectors. We also in the plan recommend support for the Great Seneca Transit Network, as well as other efforts underway like the North Bethesda Transitway and state-provided bus service on I-270. One change from the last time I think we presented to you was the way we framed the long-term vision. So previously, we kind of had just elevated a red line extension to Germantown as the top priority. Now we're really bringing Mark and Red Line kind of on equal footing in how we think about the long-term vision for this area. So in addition to a red line extension, we're supporting the long-term potential for Mark, which includes recommending increased service to 15-minute headways, as well as bidirectional service throughout the course of the day. We're also supporting new Mark stations at Shady Grove and White Flint, which are recommendations that are in previous master plans. We also have a variety of supporting recommendations. I'm not going to go through each of these, but these generally look at how can we make the transit network most successful. So looking at prioritizing transit, biking, and walking access, supporting repurposing traffic lanes, and really investing in multimodal investments over auto capacity improvements. And then also looking at ways that we can support incremental implementation. We don't want to have to wait for planning to be complete for the entire corridor connectors before we see some things be built on the ground. So where can we see wins of maybe adding a mile of dedicated bus lanes in one location, and kind of building out incrementally. And lastly, there's a category of recommendations for regional opportunities. These are things that are kind of longer in the future and are generally outside the purview of what the county can accomplish on its own, but are things that the plan does recommend. So studying an extension of the Purple Line west of Bethesda, designing the American Legion Bridge to support rail transit, and then also exploring a more direct transitway connection to Frederick City. So in a previous presentation, we may have talked about the monorail proposal between Shady Grove and Frederick, and this is saying, you know, the monorail may not be the right option, but we do want to continue to study what an improved connection to Frederick could look like. And so, you know, trying to keep it really brief. I know you've covered a lot of content tonight already, so I just want to thank you all for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. So I guess, folks, you know, let's spend a little bit of time asking questions if you have any of Jesse. And so Jesse, can you so what is the current status of the corridor forward? I mean, you listed at this point, much of the plan has been accepted and approved by the council. Is that correct?
Yes. So the plan has been approved by the council. It needs to go through an administrative process at the planning department or through the planning board and commission to be adopted, but we're not anticipating any changes through that process. It's kind of purely administrative. At this time, we don't have a polished plan document to show you. We have kind of what we presented to the council, but in the coming weeks, we'll be putting together a document that incorporates the changes that were made through the council process. So yeah, this plan has been approved.
But right now it's really there's no funding allocated for it. There's no implementation planning as yet started. None of the, you know, ground level details or even the funding to move forward on that is in place at this time. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think typical for a lot of our master plans that are setting, you know, the long-term vision, whether that's just for transportation or, you know, we talked about you all are very familiar with the 2010 GSSE plan. You know, some of the nitty-gritty implementation details are not really hashed out at this stage of the process. I will say that our top priorities included in the plan of the Maryland 355 and Veers Mill Road BRTs are recommended for funding in the county executive's budget, as well as some funding for planning of the Great Seneca Transit Network and the North Bethesda Transitway. So there is some work and some funding for implementation of some elements that are included in Corridor Forward. I guess given that the corridor connectors are a really big part of Corridor Forward, that aspect does not yet have any associated funding, given that just the timing of the conclusion of this plan and the budgeting process.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we see if I have a couple more questions, but I'd rather let others ask. And then, so does anybody else have questions for Jesse right now?
Yeah, so this is Mark Prater, I do, and I'm gonna play my new guy card because I'm fairly new on the council, and I'm still catching up. So I understand the corridor connectors; those are dedicated bus lanes. But will we be on the roads? Are we repurposing existing traffic lanes, or are we creating new traffic lanes?
So the recommendation is to repurpose lanes. But we also understand that through facility planning and kind of that additional planning that I feel like Philip was mentioning, and implementation, there may be some locations in which there are new transit lanes. I also want to note that some of these roads are master planned to have more lanes than they do today. And what we're saying is we want to repurpose some of those lanes that are master planned. So in some cases, we are recommending repurposing existing lanes. And in other cases, we're saying this road is master planned to have another lane than it does today for traffic. And instead of adding that lane for traffic, it should be added for transit.
So I assume that the primary problem that we're trying to solve with these is there's too much traffic. Is that correct?
I would say that the primary problem we're trying to solve is that is to better serve people via transit. And so in some cases, we acknowledge that transit does reduce congestion, but also, looking at those people who are reliant on transit and making a more efficient trip for them. So I think, transit serves multiple purposes. I wouldn't say that congestion mitigation was the top priority in how we evaluated this.
In the area that is, I'm going to go, I guess, looking at your map, below 270, I'm skeptical that the workers that are going into there, the researchers, the white collar workers, the scientists, are going to heavily rely on transit. But that said, you probably know more about this than I. So.
Yeah, and I understand that for sure. I think that, while there are those scientists, there's also custodians and, people who mow the lawn and, a variety of other workers that support those businesses that are primarily white collar. And so ensuring that, there's an option for those. And, people who may live in this area have just providing more choices for different travelers. So I see Jessica, you unmuted. I don't know if you want to chime in.
That was exactly it, Jesse. Just the word, thinking about choice. And today a lot of people don't have a choice for whether they take transit or drive. And so with this plan, one of the things that we're trying to do is to provide more choice so that you could choose to take transit to your job in the Life Sciences Center or from your home to to another destination. And right now that choice doesn't really exist. And so the hope is that this transit network that's proposed through Corridor Forward could help provide some of that choice.
Right. And so the existing bus service does not provide adequate choice, we'll say, or service to those people. It seems like, why are we not just looking at changing the existing bus service, bus routes? Why are we talking about carving out, special lanes for the buses?
Yeah, so I guess a few things to respond to that. One thing I do want to note that the county is currently doing a Ride-on Reimagine study led through MCDOT, and that is looking at kind of all of the bus services in the area and saying how can that be reallocated to best serve communities. But I will say that, part of this project and part of how we're looking at transit planning in the county is how do we make transit competitive? And so by giving buses dedicated lanes, we're allowing the transit vehicles to travel more quickly and making transit more competitive with driving. Right now, what we see in this area, while there is transit service, getting from point A to point B by transit takes much longer than it does by car. And so looking at how we can really meet the county's economic, environment, and equity goals through transit by repurposing or adding some dedicated space for bus lanes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone else have questions for Jesse?
I don't have a question, but just a comment. The chamber has formally weighed in at various stages along the way, and the issue is the repurposed lanes. That will require traffic studies. Is that's correct before repurposing lanes? And my opinion, I drive these roads all the time, as we all do. I just don't see a scenario where we're going to take an auto lane away from Great Seneca Highway or 355 or Quince Orchard Boulevard. I just don't see it happening. And I know that we are going to rely on the traffic study, but I feel like the plan's done, right? So it doesn't matter what we say, doesn't matter what we think at this point in time, right? The plan's done. But I just think that a lot of these ideas are predicated on taking away a lane. And I just, as I've said formally, I don't think that that's realistic. And we'll go forward and see how that works. And I am disappointed that the Corridor Cities for Transit Way is not going forward because it was, I felt, a pretty gold standard of what a BRT system could be. And now we're not getting that. And I think that's disappointing.
Yeah, thanks for that feedback. I guess I will say that the intent of the corridor connectors is not to degrade service from what the corridor cities transitway would have provided. And we do have a recommendation in the plan to continue to have the state fund some of the corridor connectors that most closely align with the corridor cities transitway. But the intent here is really to get something implemented that provides comparable service to what the CCT would have provided. I'm sure, as you've seen, the CCT hasn't moved forward as quickly as I'm sure many people would have liked. And so, through our analysis, we see this as a viable alternative that can really be on the ground.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Just for fun, this is Steve and Jesse. I'm going to have a little bit of fun here. I know that not all of our committee members may be familiar with all the terms, and you used a term in your presentation that I think I'd like to have you explain. And it gets to this great question of what's a headway. And of course, the immediate answer is like, oh, probably 8 or 9 pounds. But maybe you have a better explanation of what a headway is when you're talking about transit.
Sure, thank you. So when we talk about how frequently a bus comes or a train comes, we either use the term frequency or headway. So when you say frequency, you are saying, X number of buses per hour, say. But when we say headway, we're talking about the amount of time between the buses. So 15-minute headways would mean the bus comes every 15 minutes. Whereas you might say for frequency, you'd say, oh, well, the bus comes 4 times an hour. It's just a different way of talking about kind of the same concept.
Great. Any other questions before I ask mine? But anyone else? All right. Well, I'm not going to keep on asking. I'll ask my question. So, for the CCT in the master plan, there were a pretty extensive set of implementation guidelines and recommendations around stations and this areas around the stations and so on and so forth. Are we retaining any or of that at all with the new corridor connectors? Are we? I mean, one of the stated objectives as a CCT, right? I mean, originally, we all know the history of the CCT. Originally, it was a rail line, light rail, and of course, reality set in, and it became a BRT, and then of course reality set in again, and here we are. And each time, we've all expressed the concerns that as we reduce the level of amenity associated with the service, we're also reducing the likelihood that certain target populations and demographics will avail themselves of the service. I still have that concern, frankly. So are we retaining any of the amenity level of the CCT concept? Are there implementation guidelines? Does it vary across the transit network that we're looking at now? I know that there's a fairly established plan for the 355 transitway, for instance, but I'm not clear on what else we're doing.
Thanks for that question, and perhaps I can start us, and we can, and perhaps Jesse can add on. When you say sort of like level of service or level of amenities, I think I want to sort of understand a little bit more specifically what you mean by that. But the corridor connectors are dedicated bus lanes, so that means that the bus is running in its own lane separate from cars to make sure that we are providing a service that can be frequent, reliable, and competitive with driving. And Jesse had mentioned that the plan's recommendations are kind of grouped into 4 categories, and she went quickly through what some of those supporting recommendations are. And those supporting recommendations are where the sort of like level of amenities are present in the plan's recommendations. So as an example, and I'm just looking at my other screen at some of the details in the recommendations, but we have a recommendation, for example, that says ensure safe and efficient access to planned transit stops for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other micromobility modes, provide buffered sidewalks, protected crossings, bicycle facilities, and lighting to serve new master plan facilities, stops, and locations, provide bicycle and scooter parking facilities, make sure that all master plan transit stops are ADA accessible. Think about, how we are accommodating transfers from on-demand services like ride sharing. So we have sort of those levels of detail in the supporting recommendations of the plan. Does that help to kind of share a bit more about I hesitate to say the service, but the sort of infrastructure and supporting components that are recommended with the plan?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's helpful in the sense that it tells me that the general, those are pretty broad and general guidelines and recommendations, but they're directionally correct, and I think they align with what we'd hope for. But so I remember, back when we were reviewing the CCT plans, and again, unlike Marilyn, I was never a huge fan of the CCT alignment, but I did like the CCT concept in terms of the implementation guidelines and the amenity levels that, those I was, a fan of. And so we had not only dedicated bus lanes, but we had separated bus lanes with curbing in certain areas. We had, these beautiful renderings of, stations covered, probably 10 people there, landscaping, bike parking. We didn't really talk about car share at the time. There was conversation about accommodating transfers, things that you typically associate more with rail type service and less with, the bus, where you're lucky if you have a cover over your head at the bus stop on the corner, right? And if you do, it's big enough for 1.5 people. So there's a yawning, the guidelines are great, but there's also leave a wide range of opportunity for interpretation, funding, vagaries and things like that, right? Which can broadly affect how the implementation takes effect. So I'm wondering how, where if we have a sense of what directionally where we're going relative to those guidelines.
Yeah, I guess I can't speak to those guidelines specifically, but I do feel like the plan intends that the stations that serve the corridor connectors would have commensurate amenities to the other BRT routes that are planned. So like 355 and the US 29 Flash. And so, some of those stations are going to be more of a major hub with additional amenities, while some, kind of to what you were saying, there would be a range. But the corridor forward plan itself does not go into a high level of detail about which individual stations would have what level of amenities.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's my question for now. So I'll open it back up. Does anybody else have any additional questions for Jesse right now, or any comments?
Jane again. I also, I'm assuming as the master plan revisions or update, all these stations, et cetera, will be reflected in it, as well as the development density and stages, et cetera. Is that like another conversation since this?
Jane, thank you for that. If I can sort of repeat back to you what I think you were asking to make sure I have it correct. Are you asking if the Great Seneca plan that we're beginning will, incorporate the station locations and densities and those sorts of things?
Yeah, if I'm the previous master plan staging was based on the CCT being implemented and funded, et cetera. Now that that's not there, how much bus infrastructure or transit corridors will need to be constructed or implemented before are we redoing all the staging based on these new transit corridor connections?
Well, again, I would just reiterate that what we have in the recommendations for Corridor Forward, staff and based on their approval, I would say the planning board and the council feel that the corridor connectors are commensurate with the what was planned for the Corridor Cities Transitway in terms of, providing dedicated transit service to serve the Mid-County and the Up-County communities, and also to leverage the investment in infrastructure along the Maryland 355 corridor. But, having said that, the Great Seneca plan that we're starting will be an opportunity for us to review the station locations at a finer grain of detail. There'll be an opportunity for us to review the land use and zoning and the staging requirements. Those are the things that we are, really hoping to investigate through the Great Seneca plan that Marin is leading, and we're having a kickoff meeting tomorrow evening. Hopefully that's on some of your calendars. So those are sort of, elements that we will be looking at through the Great Seneca plan.
So I have a question, Gary Ehrenrich. Maybe I'm a little confused about the status of the Corridor Cities Transitway. It is still in the master plans. It hasn't been removed from a master plan. Is that correct? The Corridor Forward did not remove the right of way or the Corridor Cities Transitway. It's still in for funding. It's still in the constrained long range plan. It's still in master plans for the county. Am I right on that, Jesse?
I think it's a bit nuanced. So portions of the CCT where no dedication has been made, those are let me start again. I'm going to start more high level. Essentially, the corridor connectors are replacing the Corridor Cities Transitway. And as I mentioned, it's a reimagining. So what we're hoping the state will do is that we're asking them to fund, I think it's 3 of the 7 corridor connectors as the kind of more formal replacement of the CCT. And those are the connectors that most closely align with the original alignment of the CCT. We are not vacating any dedications that were previously for the CCT, but any right-of-way that had not yet been dedicated for the CCT, we're no longer asking for a dedication for that, given that there's no longer really a master plan transit way that it would apply for. So this is really intended to replace the CCT.
So there's language in the approved Corridor Forward that says this supersedes, it usually does, other master plans. And these are the segments. Is there actual a map that show here are the segments of the CCT which are no longer in the plan?
I don't know that we include a specific map that calls out the segments no longer included. We could probably add an appendix, just given, that the plan document has been approved, but we could probably add an appendix that just specifies the segments that you're
that would be helpful, because I would eliminate some confusion in the future.
Okay.
If it's helpful, we can pull up the map again that Jesse showed in the presentation that shows the previously master planned alignment and the corridor connectors. And so really the areas where there is not overlap would be, I don't know, Jesse, if you want to point. I'm using my pointer, but you guys can't see it.
Right. So you're basically took it out of King Farm and over 270 and diagonally to go to Fields and to downtown Crown.
Yeah,
so
again,
that part is clearly not with any other marking.
Yeah, and the intent of that again was to eliminate the need for that overpass at Fields Road. We felt like using the existing connections across I-270 would make this more buildable and easily implementable. And so for that reason, we recommended removal of that segment.
Yeah.
The other thing I would note is that we do have language in the in the approved plan that specifically discusses shifting the funding commitments in the consolidated transportation program from the CCT to the corridor connectors, specifically those connectors, as Jesse mentioned, that align with the previously master planned CCT alignment.
So you have a formal letter from county executive and county council requesting
No,
that the funds be substituted.
in the approved plan, there is a recommendation to work with Mdot to shift the funding commitments in the CTP from the CCT to the corridor connectors.
Okay, but you haven't submitted anything yet requesting. So the plan, the CTP that was approved in the last just concluded General Assembly has the CCT as previously envisioned in it. Okay.
My understanding is yes, but with a 0 line item.
And it's fully funded in the visualized 2045 plan, which is up for public comment till the end of the month and will be approved as the new long-range plan for the region in June. So we can't get federal funds for any of the things you're referring to until we can get them in the constrained long-range plan, showing that there's funding and direction. I just wanted to lay that out because I think it is important from a timing and a staging perspective that we're going to update the long-range plan in 2 years. So that gives us the opportunity to make sure that the projects are identified, documented, the costs associated with them are identified, and that we start acquiring property and rights of way that we need when properties develop along those routes, if we need property and development on those new routes. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gary. We've had a pretty collaborative process with your colleagues at DOT and look forward to continuing that that collaboration.
No, I agree. But I'm saying is that to move anything forward, we have to take some more steps. That's what I'm trying to identify. And the Corridor Cities Transway still is fully funded in the visualized 2045. So we have to find a way of adjusting that, and we can't do it this go around because we're finishing the public comment period. All of the air quality analysis has been completed. It's a 2-year effort to try to update the plan. So we'll have to work on that come June, July of this year.
Yeah, I would just add, Gary, though, that, given the coarse nature of like a regional model and the way that they've probably evaluated the CCT, I think that the segments of the corridor connectors that we've put forward as a replacement for the CCT probably provide, I imagine it's very comparable. I know that it's not exact, but I think the costs would be lower, but I think from a performance perspective, it's probably relatively similar.
Well, we're also now looking at greenhouse gas issues as well. So I'm agreeing with you. It won't make a difference in the air quality conformity at one bit. But it's just a question that there's processes that we'll have to follow if we want to advance your short-term recommendations. So they're eligible for infrastructure funds and other right now they're not because they're not in any constrained long range plan.
Okay, Gary, anything else? All right, so we're at 9:02. So does anybody have any additional pressing questions before we start to wrap things up? Okay, well then, Jesse, thank you very much for the presentation. I guess normally we would now, Marilyn, look to see if the committee has any comments that they'd like to submit about plans, presentations that are planned such as this. But at this time, I mean, this plan is approved and we're just getting an update. So I don't know that does anyone on the committee feel like there's some commentary that they would like to that they'd like to submit? Gary, your feedback I think gets entered along the way because you're kind of part of the process and you'll be in touch about these things. So, anybody else have anything that they feel the committee should be contributing?
I would just say that, once it's finished, I think it would be great for the committee to have it just for the record.
Great. Okay. Well, then I think we're about ready to close out the meeting. So Steve or Tamika, Jessica, anyone have anything else that we need to cover before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I thought we would check one thing with the committee. We've been going typically with, I think, a fourth Tuesday of each month meeting, but I think in May, we'd like to have a meeting in May, but I think it could be the 24th or the 31st. The 31st is the Tuesday after Memorial Day. And we thought we would check with the committee just real quick if any members of the committee have an inclination one way or another, whether the 24th or the 31st would work better or worse for you all.
Okay, bye, Tim.
No preference here.
Okay, well, we can, and so we have a couple of options. So we'll maybe we'll reconnoiter internally and get back to you and let you know which date looks like it might work out best for our preparation. Jessica, do you have any other thoughts?
Well, I was just going to note for folks, I'm not sure if this makes a difference, but I think Memorial Day is May 30th. And so I wasn't sure if, if folks are taking a long weekend or an extra long weekend and, you'd rather meet on the 24th and get it out of the way. Or, would rather kind of come back from the holiday and have a conversation. I wasn't sure if that made a difference for people.
Seems like there's not a lot of passion around this topic. So, so I guess it's the ball's in your court. Do we have a rough agenda for the next meeting at this time, or will we be discussing that over the ensuing couple of weeks? I guess Steve, Jessica, any rough agenda?
Yeah, I think, we've talked about a couple of things, a discussion about the open meetings and public participation. So cover that a little bit. Aaron's walkthrough of the DAIC. I'm kind of anticipating we may have something more fulsome to discuss. And I think staff is probably going to meet next week and talk about anything else we have coming down the pike, both in the master plan area and in the regulatory arena. So we'll get back in touch with you once we have a better idea about that. Is there anything in particular that the committee, I know you guys have asked for information about things at times, and you may get some more ideas if anybody can again attend that kickoff meeting tomorrow night for the Great Seneca Plan. You're certainly invited to do that, and that may give us all some ideas about what maybe would be of help for the committee to hear as we move forward.
Did you
Steve,
have you
uh,
sent out that information about the meeting last night? I mean tomorrow night, or is that something you could distribute to the committee members?
I think that Marin did send you all an announcement about it, but I can also, I'm looking for the link and I can drop it in the chat if that helps, or we could also, send it back out to the group.
Yeah, that would be true.
Yeah, I think
I
sending
had
it.
another question. I don't want to delay anything, but is there any feedback from our last letter or comments that we sent into the council? Did they adapt or recommend any of our requests? Is there an outcome feedback from our last letter recommendation on the 2 site plans we provided comment on?
I think Treville Parcel Inn hasn't been to the board yet. And is I'm trying to suddenly.
That's tomorrow night as well. So I was like, do they do that in the same meeting? I got an invitation from the Attorney General on Parcel N, like a notice that she forwarded to me that the hearing was tomorrow night, but I didn't know. And then I know there was this other kickoff. So I'm wondering if it's the same meeting or are there 2 meetings tomorrow night?
No, the planning board meeting, I'm trying to remember. Let me, while we're talking here, I'll see if I can pull up the current planning board agenda for the next couple of weeks. I know it's going very soon. See the 28th. I'm not seeing it on, I think it's May 5th is the date that it's going to the planning board.
See, I have a letter from the attorney on Parcel N that was sent to the state saying it's Wednesday, April 27th at 7 p.m. Join the Zoom.
Yeah. The planning board is not meeting, does not typically meet on Wednesday nights. Treville Parcel N is going to the planning board on May 5th. It's currently scheduled as item 9.
Well, then what is this letter that I got from the attorney saying it's the pre-submission community meeting? Preliminary plan and site plan amendment application, Treville Gateway Parcel N, Building C project, date, time.
C. Okay, that explains it. Thanks, Jane. Yeah, we often don't know about the public meetings. Their applicants are required to hold a public meeting prior to submitting any new application. And so Treville Parcel N has been approved so far for Building A and Building B. It's the Building B site plan is the one that you commented on, and that is the item that is going to the planning board on May 5th. This sounds like they are getting ready to submit a 3rd application for Building C. We have not seen that yet.
I got it. So this is the Building C project pre-submission community meeting, and then there's a planning. So they're both at the same time, which is my confusion. Thank you. But they are 2 different meetings.
They are 2 different meetings, and yes, this is apparently the one that the applicant has to have prior to submitting the next site plan application.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up. I was confused, like.
I can understand why.
Same day, same night, same time. I jumped to the conclusion that the Zoom was a planning commission meeting, and it's not. You're right.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So you're saying that you haven't seen this submission that this pre-meeting with the community tomorrow is for?
We typically don't. I know that there have been some, we've had some discussions. We knew that it would be coming in, but we have not seen what folks will see at the meeting tomorrow night. They are required.
Anybody else get a letter of invite to attend the pre-community meeting for Building C other than Shady Grove?
It's typically sent to adjacent and confronting property owners and to nearby neighborhood associations. So those are, there's a there's kind of a formula for who they're required to send the invitations and notices out to.
Okay.
So anybody
Just
outside of
surprised
that.
we're not part of that group. I mean, I understand because we're a neighboring property. I got it. Okay. You know, we are an adjoining property, but interesting that nobody else in this group knows what I'm talking about.
Jane, you're just more important than we are.
No. It's like, it's just confusing. That's all. I'm like, it's a little weird. You know, you would think their land developer would include other people. Somebody else from this group. We have adjoining neighborhood property, etc. Anyway, I'll poke into that meeting before I go to the Seneca and see who's in the room.
Okay, so thanks, Jane, and thanks, Steve and Jessica. So yeah, I mean, if you could forward back out the info for the meeting tomorrow night, that'd be great. Appreciate that. And otherwise, and yeah, I mean, so rough agenda for next week, you know, for next meeting, we're talking about the two items were, you know, look the website, the portal, and how to get around that, and then the other thing. What was the other thing you had mentioned, Steve? Was just the public, public participation, and then we'll see if there's anything else that pops up. So I guess without further ado, unless anybody has any objections, I suggest we wrap it up for tonight. All right. Thanks, everyone. And
thank you.
Talk to you in a bit.
Bye. Thanks. Great meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.